Have you ever had to apologize for something pretty serious? While you're processing through the emotions and the consequences and the guilt, you wonder, how did I end up in this mess? Months or years ago, you never even imagined you'd be in this situation. And as you look back, you begin to realize that you wouldn't have chosen what you did a few years ago, but you did start a choice. You did make a decision a few years ago that actually got you set up and put you in this situation where you did make this mistake. James, Jesus' half-brother, says this. He says, "Let no man say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured away and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." And that's what he says in James 1:13 through 15. Well, we're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 5 here this morning, and do part 2 of what Leslie started last week. Leslie spent more time on Naaman and Elisha, and now we're going to spend time on Gehazi and the choices that he makes. And I want to leave something with you as we think about this morning. See, the desires of our heart, if left unchecked, will bring about untold damage to yourself and to others around you. I want to say that again. The desires of your heart, if left unchecked, will bring about damage to yourself and to others around you. So I want to set a little bit of the stage around here, what we're going to study. See, last week Leslie spoke about a general by the name of Naaman, and who, due to the advice of a young girl, went to see Elisha's God's prophet about healing him of a skin disease. Naaman came in faith, but due to his expectations, almost messed up God's plan for him. He didn't want to get he didn't want to wash in the Jordan. He's like, no, I expected something grander and bigger, and here you are. You want me to go wash in this 7 times? That makes no sense. But after some prodding by his servants and stuff, he finally decides to do it, and he realizes, wow, this God is real. Elisha's God is the real deal. And he left with his heart changed. Now, we're going to be spending time studying right after that, mere minutes after Naaman leaves the presence of Elisha and then goes. We have what's going to play out here next, all right? And so if you have your Bibles or your smartphones, pull them out and open up in your Bible into 2 Kings chapter 5. See, Gehazi is going to learn that his desires, left unchecked, brought damage to himself and to others he wouldn't have even dreamed. Seriously, you guys are in 2 Kings chapter 5. Let's read. It'll be verses 19 through 20. Let's start there. Let's start the story off. Okay, but when Naaman had gone from him a short distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, "See, my master has spared this Naaman the Syrian, and not accepting from his hand what he brought. As the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him." And so this is our first point that we're going to make here, is that your desires shift the core of your heart. Your desires shift your heart. So your heart is your desires, it's your makeup, it's your emotions, it's your thoughts. It's pretty much all of you brought together. And here in it, your desires actually sit underneath, sort of as a foundation for what plays out. And so here he makes a couple of things. I don't know if you guys noticed those when we were reading. The first one was in, he said, go, but when Naaman had gone, Gehazi says, my master has spared. So the idea is that he deserved something. Elisha should not have treated Naaman this way. Elisha should not have shown grace to Naaman this way. There should have been something out of it. We should have gotten some money out of it. So that's his first thing. Is he didn't really view grace as grace is. It's a little more legalistic. It's a little more, I want something out of this, and Elisha should have gotten this for us. The other one was in verse in verse 20 says, my master spared this Naaman the Syrian. And so there's also this idea, this little bit of hatred. See, Syria or Aram, they did not have a good relationship with Israel, especially around this time. And so Gehazi probably didn't have a lot of warm, fuzzy feelings about the major general of the main army of this country. It's like us being a big fan of a Chinese general or general of ISIS or something like that. We're not going to show that level of grace. And so Gehazi's like, hey, I want some revenge here. This isn't okay. And the other one was in not accepting from his hand what he brought. He thought he wanted something. So there was another one where Syrian he spared. I will do. Yeah. So that pretty much covers that. Now he does say in us. You guys notice, as the Lord lives. So he almost adds like a spiritual dynamic to it, which I thought was very unique. Here he is. He's speaking out of his heart from revenge and from bitterness and this sort of like racial, maybe not racial, but like national prejudices. And then he says, as the Lord lives, as the Lord lives. And what that means is, I promise that this is going to happen. I have established in my heart that I am going to make this guy pay. I'm going to make him cough up what he owes. And if Elisha won't do it, then I'm going to do it. Now, I want to show you guys here a second. I'm going to show you guys a clip and attach it on here, a picture that's going to be about a volcano. And so when we think about a volcano, all right, you have the volcano and the lava comes out, and that's generally what we think of is the eruption and the explosion. But a lot of times we don't consider that underneath that volcano is these tectonic plates. And as they shift and cause friction and tear up the ground below it, the magma and the pressure builds underneath. And that is how our heart works. See, that's why our desires shift the core. Here Gehazi's been with Elijah for a long time, and he has let these thoughts sit and anchor in his heart. And now he's going to do, and this has literally shifted, and now the pressure is building, and he's about to commit a very serious sin. And so this is what our desires are like. They're like a volcano. Now, we're going to tackle how we can guard our hearts here a little bit later. Now, what we're going to see here, verses 21 through 26, is this one. It says, you can't cover up your sin. So the first point was, your desires shift the core of your heart, so they are working underneath. The second point is you can't cover up your sin, and that is what Gehazi tries to do here. So let's read verse 21. It says, so Gehazi followed Naaman, and when Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, is all well? And he said, all is well. My master has sent me to say, there have just come now to me from the hill country of Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothing. And Naaman said, be pleased to accept 2 talents. And he urged him and tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothing and laid them on his 2 of his servants. And when they carried them before Gehazi. And when he went to the hill, he took them from their hand and put them in his house. And he sent them in away, and they departed. So think about this, all right? So he goes up with some scheme, all right? He has to start covering up this lie. He couldn't ask for all of the wealth, so he just asked for a little bit, 2 talents of silver. And he gets 2 talents of silver and a lot of fine clothing. Everything's good. Not only that, is he then has the 2 servants go and bring them into the house. Now, this is good from the standpoint of a scheme, because now Elisha hasn't even come in contact with any of this. All the riches is at home. You're good to go. We're set. All right, plan so far is perfect. And so he's covering this up really well. Naaman has no idea, and now Elisha has no idea. So we keep going. And so then he went in and stood before his master. So he didn't even run to continue the scheme. He actually goes and stands before Elijah and says, all right, I'm ready to do your bidding. What would you have me to do? I'm ready to work. And Elisha said to him, where have you been, Gehazi? So now not only is he lying in action, now is he going to lie or not? And he says, well, your servant went nowhere. But Elisha said to him, did not my heart go when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? did not my spirit go with you when you did that deed with Naaman? It's like, Gehazi, I saw the whole thing. All your schemes, all your plans, God showed it to me. I know. I've seen it. See, Gehazi believed that he could cover up his sin and hide it from Elisha. And he might have been able to hide it from Elisha, but he was not able to hide it from Elisha's God. And God saw everything. See, when our desires take root, as the tectonic plates of our heart begin to shift, and as a result, the magma is building in intensity, and the pressure is building, and it gets ready to explode. And since the magma is coming to the top, what we try to do when we're caught in sin is we actually try to keep building a volcano bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and wider and wider and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we keep going as high and high and high as we can because we're trying to erase the sin from coming to the top. And here he is, he's racing the sin, and finally he can't keep up with it anymore. And this is what happens in our own life. We try to make this lie as big and big and big as we can, but eventually we can't keep it up anymore, and it's exposed. And the sad part is God knows the entire time what is going on. He's seen it. And that's what he's saying here to Gehazi. God saw everything. You couldn't hide your sin. You couldn't cover up your sin. See, there's a verse that Moses says to the Israelites in Numbers chapter 32, verse 23. He says, "But if you will not do so, behold, you have sinned against the Lord. And be sure your sin will find you out. Eventually your sin will be exposed, and you won't be able to predict it, and you won't know when it's going to come out, but it will come out. Eventually your volcano will break, and the pressure and the lava will erupt out of there." Now here we see in our third point is that when our sin is exposed, the damage is unpredictable. Remember, we were building it up, but eventually it's going to cave in somewhere. So verse 26 says, "But he said to him, did not my heart go when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Was it a time to accept money and garments, olive orchards and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male servants and female servants? Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants for forever." And so he went out from his presence a leper like snow. See, not only did Elisha see just the action, he also, because of what God had revealed to him, saw exactly what was going on inside Gehazi's heart. It says, "Gehazi, you were going to use your money to build olive orchards and vineyards, and to buy sheep and oxen, male servants and female servants. You were trying to get rich off of him. This was a time to show grace and mercy, and instead you wanted him to pay. And as you make him pay, you get rich accordingly." Elisha was able to see the heart of Gehazi. And this is what gets to our next point, that our sin, when it is exposed, is unpredictable. It says, you notice, if Naaman would have realized, or not Naaman, if Gehazi would have realized that he was going to get leprosy as a result of his sin, he wouldn't have done it. And not only that, he would not have done it if he knew that his family and his children, the leprosy, would have continued with them forever. There was no way he would have made that choice, but he did. He made that choice. See, when our sin is exposed, the damage is unpredictable. Now, we've been using a volcano to illustrate this. Now, in 1980, in the state of Washington, many of you are familiar with a volcano that erupted, Mount St. Helens. And I was doing some research, and I noticed something. I'm going to show you guys a picture here. But they had no idea the exact direction and how the volcano was going to explode. It eventually did, and it blew a certain direction. Now, they can be pretty good at predicting some of this stuff, depending on how it's shaped and things like that. But with our sin, we can sort of predict how it'll damage, but we can't predict everywhere that the damage goes. See, just like Gehazi, when he sinned and his sin was exposed, the damage spread. It impacted him, and it impacted his family. And in a way, it impacted Elisha too. Elisha lost his servant, and so his sin had unpredictable consequences. And when your sin is exposed, it will have unpredictable consequences. It will hurt those closest to you, but it will keep traveling and keep going down. People have ruined entire fortunes for their family due to one generation of poor investments and poor spending and greed that messes up future generations worth of wealth. See, our sin doesn't just impact us, it impacts others. We can't plan for that damage. And as James says, the result of sin is ultimately death. See, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. When desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. And as we close and as we think about this pattern of sin and its damage, my question for you is, how do we prevent the damage? How do we prevent the passions from taking over our hearts and twisting us and forcing us to build up this volcano in order to try to hide our sin or it'll eventually expose? How can we start at the beginning? And how can we deal with the heart and its desires? See, oftentimes when we think of sin, we just think of sin as rule breaking. God has a rule, we break it, we sin. And yes, that is right. But at times that doesn't go far enough. See, the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 14:23 says this: whatever does not proceed from faith is sin. See, sin is seeking satisfaction outside of what God has designed for your life. We break God's rules because we, at our core, believe that the rules God has for us, those expectations and guidelines, are not good enough for me. And Adam and Eve believed the paradise of God was good, but it wasn't enough. And that is why they ultimately took the fruit and ate of that. And the same thing Gehazi believed, that he deserved more than what he was getting. And as a result, he used and he lied and he twisted a wonderful gift that Elisha had given to him and went and tried to take it and use it for his own good, for his own wealth and his own selfish desires. And I think this is why the death of Jesus Christ is so significant. See, the cross promised us that Jesus is enough for us. He is enough for our sin problem that we had. By dying on the cross, we say, hey, I can't do this myself. I believe that Jesus did this for me. He is enough. And as a result of that faith, we're washed white as snow and our sins are forgiven. But it's not just in that one moment. See, we have to make a daily choice every single day. Hey, that what Jesus has given me is enough every single day. Those guidelines that he's given me is for my own good. And it keeps me safe and it helps me. And it allows me to rest and see God, what God has given to me every day is exactly what I need. The family he has given me, exactly what I need. The food he has given me is exactly what I need. And at times the wealth and the money, it might be a little short right now, but that is exactly what we need right now to accomplish his perfect plan. So we must be mindful of our hearts and rest in the Lord. See, Paul says in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11, he says, for I have learned in whatever situation I am in to be content. And the key to prevent ourselves and to prevent passions from shifting and guiding and taking over our hearts is to learn to be content in what God has given us every single day. And I hope you have stayed warm. And thank you for spending time listening to this. For those who are involved in our community group, I'm going to post the community group sheets online on our website. And you can just download those onto your phone or computer, and you can write out the questions. But the questions are designed to further our study and our thoughts in regards to this idea of Jesus Christ being enough for us every single day. Well, I hope you have a wonderful day. I missed you. I missed not speaking to you in real time and seeing your facial, your facial expressions and your laughter and the snide looks and maybe even some of you who've fallen asleep. And I just stay safe, and we'll see you next week.